welcome to the SaaS Revolution Show. I'm your host, Alex Theuma, CEO, founder of SaaStock. Delighted to be joined today by Barb Hyman, who is the founder and CEO of Sapia.ai and joining us all the way from Melbourne, Australia. How are you doing, Barb?
I'm doing very well, thanks, Alex.
Good. I imagine it's pretty late there at the moment, but I think you're sort of used to these late.
You don't even want to know.
Okay.
You don't even want to know.
Well, the lighting is fine, but I'm assuming, given the location, that it is a late one. And good on you, and thank you for joining the podcast at such a late hour. So great to have you on the show, Barb. We always ask our guests to introduce themselves, really get to know them a little bit better for the listeners. So please do tell us who is Barb Hyman.
Well, I'm probably the least likely person, if you look at my background, to be leading an AI company. I'm very contrarian in that regard. So I'm neither a software engineer nor a data scientist, and I'm female and I'm over 50. And so when you compare that profile to the profile of most founders getting funding for AI businesses, I'm certainly an alternate profile. But what I have, and I guess what really defines me, is I come from having been in the seat of the customer that we're selling to. I was a former CHRO, and I really know what their pain points are and their problems, and I feel for them and I have empathy for them. And in a world where you're selling AI into HR, it's pregnant with risk and fear and a lot of myths. Building trust is the most critical thing that you need to do with the prospect, with the customer. And I think that's what's enabled me to build a successful business. I'm also a mum of 3, which is another part of my life that defines me in my leadership.
Yeah, and obviously challenges, but great things with that as well, with having kids and running businesses and so on and so forth. Forgive my ignorance, what is a CHRO?
It is a Chief HR Officer. So at the C-suite, HRD is another way to think about it. Chief People Officer. It's a person that takes care of people and culture in organizations, ideally a report to the CEO.
Yep. And did you enjoy that role?
Well, I kind of fell into it. My career's been one of being opportunistic and not particularly planned. And my background was initially as a lawyer, then I went and did an MBA, moved into strategy consulting at BCG. And then when I had kids, didn't want to do the travel, so I landed in an HR marketing role. So I've kind of just taken roles that were presented to me that looked interesting, that played into the things that I felt I could offer, that were sort of unique. And I did. I wouldn't want to go back into it. I feel right now, this is the best job I've ever had.
Awesome. And so tell us then, you said obviously you sat in the seat of the customer, but which might sort of lead into this, but what is the founding story behind Sapia.ai?
It's very long, Alex. And to be honest, I think it's worthy of a book or a sitcom, so I'm going to save the long version, but the short version is when I was a CHRO, first at Boston Consulting Group and then at a tech company, which was then the largest tech company in Australia. Reality is that your people, even though they're not on the balance sheet, they are your biggest asset. And it just struck me that the lack of science, the lack of data that goes into that decision was striking, and the pervasive bias. In the tech company, and a lot of tech companies are still like this, they won't look at you unless you look like them, which typically means you come from the same background. I remember when I was in the tech company, if you hadn't come from a startup, even though this is a tech company worth billions of dollars that have been around for 20 years, they didn't want to know you. So there's a lot of conscious and unconscious biases, and I just felt there had to be a better way. And it also is a massive tax, hiring. You think about how much time is spent, the invisible cost of hiring with all those hiring managers. It got to a point in my role at the tech company where my boss, the CEO, said to me, Barb, we're not going to hit our revenue targets because our engineers are so busy hiring and interviewing that we're not going to build the product. So our roadmap won't get delivered. And so it became really business critical. Now, it may not be like this for every business, but to be honest, I think hiring is still very much stuck in, the way it was originally incarnated probably 50, 60 years ago.
Why do you think, I can assume, but why do you think that you're the best placed to solve this problem that you're building with Sapia.ai?
Well, it's not me alone. So I think what I bring is the empathy and the understanding of the challenge, but the actual idea of, well, how do you fix that in a very inventive, clever way is someone much cleverer than me, which is Booty, who's our chief data scientist. And, I don't think innovation comes from within. And he came from a background, a culture around where he could see that the people you hire is what really determines your culture. It's very hard to shift your culture. And so he wanted to find a different way to inform hiring decisions. He also came with a PhD in natural language processing, and he could see that language has a lot of signal. Now we know that with generative AI, but back in 2018, we didn't know that. And so he really taught himself the science of people science, behavioral science. So our product is actually a genuine world-first innovation that brings together data science, the ability to bring NLP, processing power, together with behavioral science, understanding people and being able to measure those traits and competencies to be able to make, informed decisions around them. But everything we've done has been done differently. So we've challenged the resume. From my perspective, the resume should have died a long time ago. With generative AI, it really needs to die. It is really just a proxy for advantage. It doesn't tell you who someone is, and it's very easily faked. When you think about the experience of hiring and you compare it to another consumer experience, like applying for a bank loan, why do you have to wait 3 weeks to get feedback? And mostly you won't get feedback. Why do you have to fill out copious forms? Why do I need to put in a resume and I get nothing back? I think this idea that the recruitment process is designed for the organization rather than designing for the individual and the human experience fundamentally needs to be challenged. So along the way, I think, I didn't know tech, right? And I don't know AI and its potential. And that's where Broody has been the innovation machine. We've had an R&D team from day one. We've built a whole series of byproduct innovations as a function of our product that are probably worthy of their own markets in themselves. So the two of us are the perfect example that innovation comes from difference. We spar a lot, we disagree a lot, but we both bring something that has built a truly unique platform and product for the market.
I guess just picking up on what you said in terms of the resume, that being quite a dated format, and your belief that it kind of needs to go. What would go in place of that? Because obviously, from what I see, and I think it's pretty standard. I'm sure you see it as well. People are hiring, companies are hiring. They post the job, people apply with their resume and a covering letter, maybe a video, and that seems to kind of pretty much be standard in the market. What would you suggest should be in place of the resume if we were to get rid of that?
Well, look, what we all do when we're hiring for any role is we connect with the person, we interview them. And effectively, that's what we've built. We've scaled the science of a structured interview. A structured interview is if you ask the people that you're wanting to assess the same questions and you measure them against some rubric, some defined set of requirements. That's effectively what we're doing through our technology. So it's only 5 questions. There are questions that you might ask, Alex. Tell me about an incredible team that you're a member of. Like, what do you feel you took away from that? Can you share the best example you've ever had of engaging customers? Why? What made it so great? So you're asking people to share their experience. It's always something that taps into their past, not what they would do, because that's not predictive of anything. And so the whole construct of it is, apart from you're actually giving everyone an interview rather than only the few that you've got capacity to interview, is it's designed to be dignifying, empowering. It's built for inclusion. So there's independent research that shows that this technology will increase application rates from women by 30% for tech roles when they know that it's AI. It is a total myth that people don't trust AI, they don't want AI. We see the complete opposite. We've had now almost 4 million candidates interviewed by this. So we're interviewing for you rather than you're doing the interview. We're assessing for the things that you care about. And so one of the things that you don't often do as a hiring manager is you don't really think about, what am I looking for? What matters here? And so it forces you to identify what are the requirements for success in this role. Now, we're not a tech code assessment. Like, we're looking for essentially the competencies around, are you a good thinker? Are you someone that works wonderfully with people? Do you have self-awareness? Are you mature? Are you resourceful? Do you have outstanding communication skills? Whatever that composition is, we build effectively what we call rule-based models, which are looking for that DNA. They're very data-based. It's very transparent. We use a tool called Model Cards, which Google invented to give confidence around what the AI is doing. And we give you a score, but we also give you the why. And when you're using AI in the context of people, you have to give a why, because otherwise no one's going to trust it. And so the resume goes. And what the candidate gets back, everyone, is a chance to learn. So we have also created a way for everyone to learn, to get coaching, to get feedback in a world where people typically get nothing. So another way that you could think about our product value is, I say this somewhat a little bit tongue-in-cheek, is we're kind of raising the collective self-awareness of humanity. People don't know themselves. They don't know their strengths. They don't know how to articulate them. They don't get manager coaching. And so that's a byproduct feature. That is why so many of our customers are consumer brands. You know, the largest retailers in Australia, Joe and the Juice, Aesop, a global luxury brand that's now owned by L'Oreal, Starbucks, where they're going to reject 100,000 people, maybe 1 million people, and they still want them to be their consumer when they're finished. So I'm very passionate about the product. I've probably given too much information on that.
That's all right. I mean, the founders, should be passionate about the product, so I wouldn't expect anything less. When was the company founded? 2018, was it?
2018.
2018.
And we've raised US dollars around 25 million.
Okay, very cool.
We had in our last round, Series A, I know your listeners always like to get a little bit of data. Series A, we had our largest customer actually invest in us, which was a great sign of, wow, this thing is really going to change the world. And they're a very smart organization. They're called Woolworths. They own a massive data science house. So they get the value of AI in the business. Mm-hmm. And now they see the value of AI in people. And that's why so many of our customers are retail, because they are further along the maturity path in understanding the power of AI and data to drive business value. And we're at about 60 enterprise customers now. Typically we're working with businesses that are at scale. They're hiring anywhere from 5,000 to 40,000 a year. Mm-hmm. They're typically, you can use us anywhere, right? You can use us in tech companies to hire for values. So we're kind of pretty broad, but you have to be really focused as a startup. And so we focus on retail, consumer brands, food and beverages, where they really love the diversity impact and they love the experience that it represents for their brand.
And so focus on enterprise, 60 enterprise customers. What's the typical ACV?
Oh, look, it's 6 figures plus. Sometimes, we're getting hopefully close. My ambition is, how do we get to $1 million customers over the next 18 months? Yep. But and they're typically multi-year relationships, because the value you get when you're using something like this, I think people don't really appreciate that AI is not just automation. Mm-hmm. In fact, automation is the low-hanging fruit. What you get is the ability to learn. You're creating the system of intelligence for an organization. So what we do is we start year one, and pretty quickly you see the obvious value in efficiency, experience, diversity. But when we learn from who's actually performing well and time in role, like whether you stay 6 months, 9 months, 12 months in these organizations, is a really good proxy for fit. And the ability to take that data, feed it in, and retrain the model to improve accuracy means that over time, we're actually kind of making ourselves a bit redundant, because if you're hiring 20,000 now, usually at least half of those are replacement hires because you haven't figured out how to hire the right fit. We want to see that, and what our customers see is that goes down almost to nothing. So that's where the huge business value is. If you can reduce turnover in an organization, there's like a flywheel of flow-on effects. You create better team cultures. You create a pipeline of more leaders, which means you get better quality leaders. You have better customer service. So solving for turnover through machine learning, it's like the Amazon model for people is what we're doing.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, as we know, building a business, SaaS business, is always full of challenges. And, often these challenges are similar through, I guess many of the listeners here will be going through and facing a lot of the same things. But often they're also quite nuanced to the particular company and obviously the industry that you're in and the problem that you're trying to solve. And when you reached out to me to come onto the podcast, and I really appreciate you doing that, you highlighted 3 of the challenges that you in particular face, and I think you touched on them a little bit, in the intro to yourself as well, as you sort of build and grow Sapia. So and this is what we kind of want to dig into, and what these challenges are and how you're overcoming them. And I think you said 1 is obviously selling a new science, 2, building a new category, and then 3, the challenges of raising capital as a female founder. So let's take them sort of in that order. And so I guess kind of like let's talk about the challenge of selling a new science, and then how you and Sapia are overcoming that.
Well, that has been the biggest challenge, and really being clever and constantly iterating our ICP. And our ICP is not just a segment, it's actually a buyer persona. And there's the early adopters, but to be honest, there aren't that many. What we look for is what we call the fast followers. And where do we find them? There's both a personality dimension to that. That could be someone who's a CHRO who is genuinely progressive. And to be honest, most aren't. So it's quite a small, narrow set. It could be someone that's new in the role. It's someone who works in an organization where there's likely to be downward pressure to start to think about using AI. So a lot of work has gone into what are the ideal conditions from a buyer persona, from a ICP that make this an easier conversation. And that is both work that gets done through the likes of a Salesforce, Salesloft and targeting, but it also is a lot of filtering work by SDRs in the role. So that's the first thing. The second is that in order to build trust, we realized that we needed to have credibility from others. So how do we credential ourselves in a world where no one knows what this thing is and it feels really scary? And, there are media reports every other day about AI is bias, which, by the way, AI is the only way of addressing human bias, right? And where these companies don't necessarily want to self-promote, they're using it either. There's still a lot of reservation around, do I really want to call out that I'm using this, particularly in the US? So we decided that we were going to go with big consumer logos that people really trust, because if they buy, and it's hard, Woolworths today was announced as the company in Australia that has the highest amount of brand equity in the country. And so it's the most trusted consumer brand. Qantas was another customer early on. So we felt if we can piggyback off their brand of trust, that's going to accelerate trust in us. So that was the first thing. We were very selective about who we wanted to take on as clients. The other one is that we invested in published research. So we've had probably 7 or 9 pieces of research, and it's a lot of effort for your R&D team to do that. It's unusual for a startup to have an R&D team to publish and peer review credible journals. And then the third thing was we actually just were ruthless about going for awards with our clients, because it's cheap marketing. We don't spend much on paid marketing. We really use our customer logos to build our own brand. And that enabled us to build traction and really trust. If they trust Sapia, then we can trust Sapia. So that was a big part of what we focus on. But certainly the first one of identifying who are those people who are willing to embrace is still really tough.
No, for sure. And it's just out of curiosity, as you're selling this new platform to a new product service to the CHRO, and you talked about getting the logos, so you're getting that kind of authority and credibility to help for the follow-on customers. How was it when getting that first customer? Obviously, if you don't have the logos, like how long was that sales cycle? How did you kind of manage to get that? Was there any help from VCs? Would love to just hear a little story there.
No, I don't think there's any shortcuts in enterprise. Yep. Even at this stage where we are right now, there is no, everyone talks about what's the sales playbook, like we're at Series A. I think the playbook will come into Series B. We are still like frigging hand-to-hand combat.
Yeah.
It's a very competitive space. It's an unbelievably noisy space. Billions of dollars have gone into HR tech, and HR loves the next shiny new thing. I think there's a big influence in the space, Josh Bersin, who talks about the average company, Fortune 500 company, has 80 tools in their HR drawer, most of which they're obviously not using. And so our strategy is more about revenue depth through product depth and going for big customers and getting big contracts that trying to appeal to, a mid-market. But at the beginning, Qantas did something like 10 pilots in a row before they signed on. And then, of course, COVID happened and there were no contracts and austerity measures. So there's a phrase that one of my board members has taught me, which I find challenging, but it's this concept of strategic patience. And, you have to just sort of keep the faith. And I look back now and I'm kind of every year I'm just shocked that we're still here. It still feels like we're in this sort of in the gutter, fighting to survive, even though we're very comfortable from a business perspective, at least in terms of our cash flow and burn given our investors. But it's very early, this space, Alex. The market is low maturity. I go to the US and I feel that they are shrouded in ignorance and blinded by fear in that market around AI. So it's going to take a while for it to take off there. The UK is much more receptive. The UK is really genuinely passionate about diversity. And we have every customer is referenceable around diversity. So that's a market that we're actively investing in right now. So I think, whilst we are comfortable with the moat that we've built, and our data is our biggest moat, it's proprietary data, it's very unusual to have that. We are one of the 3 companies in Australia that built a large language model last year, built based off that proprietary data. I have a level of strategic patience, but we put a lot of effort into CS. We're continually innovating. So for me, it's not about getting to 1,000, it's getting to 100 and then 150 and then 200. And to be frank, to be selective about who we bring on, because you invest a lot when you're working with a company from an AI perspective. It's not a set and forget. It's not put a system in place, see you later. There's an ongoing dialogue because someone needs to make decisions around things like retraining. That's a very different tech sell to most tech sales where you're just selling and you move on and you're just selling new features when they roll out.
Let's move on to the building a new category challenge. I think like over the last few years, it's been very sort of a la mode for, companies that are already in a pre-existing category to try and, reframe themselves and build a new category so they can be the leader in that category. It sounds like you actually obviously are doing something, very new and, creating a new category within, I guess, the HR tech space. But tell me if that is indeed true. And then as you're building the new category, what are the challenges and then how you're overcoming those?
So we tried and we didn't succeed in building a new category. We had this concept a couple of years ago when we rebranded to Sapia that we were going to build this category around smart interviewer. And reality is it takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of commitment, consistency, and focus. And we realized that we were too insular. We were too leading with our product rather than really leading with your problems. And so we've really pivoted now to focus less on the category and much more on here's the value that you get, right? And that's what they resonate with. Like, tick, 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 these are the things I care about. The product is kind of really recessive. And maybe that will change in Series B, where we'll have more funding from a marketing perspective to really put some grunt behind it. But to be honest, that was a poor decision to think that we could, somehow cheaply build a category. So we've really pivoted that to focus much more on the value.
Was that your decision to build a new category, or was this obviously perhaps influence from, the VCs, the board, and
No, we don't have a board that really gets involved in those. They're involved in cap raisings and strategy around raising capital. Yeah. I mean, as a CEO, I have to take ownership of that. It's one of many decisions that I've made that, was a bad decision at the time. And we didn't throw too much money at it, but everything that you do that doesn't work is just an opportunity cost in terms of time. Yeah. And I think we also we should have invested instead in extracting the testimonials out of our existing customers and leading with that rather than being so excited and proud and maybe a little bit cocky about the brilliance of what we'd invented and leading with that. So we've moved away a lot from the science as a message to market and the product as a message to market and really focusing on this is what you get and those are problems that people can really connect with.
And the third and final challenge was about the challenges of raising capital as a female founder. Now, you mentioned your Series A, 25 million. That's a very healthy Series A. So therefore, I'm assuming you've probably done a pre-seed, a seed, and moved on to the Series A. So I guess kind of obviously on the outside, on face value, it looks like you've had some great success there, and clearly you have. But what have been the challenges there that you faced as a female founder?
Look, I kind of feel a bit odd talking about it as a woman. But reality is my gender has really shaped me, and having 2 girls as well, I think a lot about what opportunities it presents and maybe how it might also present barriers. I mean, most of the world from a leadership perspective in organizations is male. There was a stat a few years ago that there were more men called John who were CEOs of listed companies in Australia than there were women. I think it's a little bit better now. In the VC world, it's way more imbalanced. Something like 3% of funding goes to women when I think they represent about a third. And mirror hiring is a concept that we're trying to tackle in our space, but mirror investing is just the same. And, I think I'm probably different in the way I'm very connected to the story. I'm connected to the buyer. I'm connected to the value. And I'm probably not good at self-promoting and inflating, the story as well as maybe some others do who are possibly younger and maybe have the naivety to just go for it. I think my age gives me a little bit more pause in terms of how I represent it, because for me, if we've got integrity with customers, we need to have integrity with VCs. And I've always felt that even if they've got lots of money, they might be billionaires, they're still making a choice to back you. And it's very much a personal you. And so being really respectful of that and leaving work every day knowing that we've honoured that trust is as important for the investor as it is for the customer. So maybe I don't project in the same way with the same narrative. I think it's really unfortunate that the VC world are not embracing technology like ours to try and create a much more diverse community of founders. There's a lot of attention on that in Australia, where the largest VC has been called out for that. There is independent research, Alex, that said that you can profile a founder. So, we would love to give that away to every VC. Any VC who's listening to this and wants to use that as a way to discover the founder profile before someone walks in the room, because it's blind, and more people will participate in that than not, because they don't have the fear that they're going to be rejected. Like, it could transform the VC sector. But yeah, it's been a challenge of finding the right fit, people who really connect with me personally in my story. And I think that's a smaller group than maybe what males might connect with.
And with the 25 million Series A, can you share maybe how long the process took, how many VCs that you spoke to? Did, the final kind of lead investor that you settled on, was that from Australia, or was this, from outside? Maybe just a little bit of, the story around.
Yeah. We just went local. So the Series A, just trying to do the conversion here, was less than the 25 because we did raise some money before that in seed, as you said. It was Macquarie Bank. Macquarie Bank is the largest investment house in Australia. They've got a global reputation. They're an incredible business, actually a female CEO, which is very unusual for an investment bank. And they are long-term users and believers in the science of assessment, which is effectively what we're doing. We're just doing it in a very unique human way. And so they looked at this and thought, wow, if this can do it better from an experience point of view and solve all of these other challenges around organizations, that's going to change the landscape. So they came from a pedigree of knowledge around the space, which I think is really meaningful. It gave it more credibility as well for us. I spoke to a lot of VCs locally, and we raised last year, so it was a tough year, from the perspective of how the market was going.
Yeah.
And now we've got Macquarie, they've got deep pockets, they're an amazing investor to have. You make these trade-offs about, do I just go to them for more money because their balance sheet is the bank's balance sheet, or do we go externally to get a different VC? I think I was much more attached to the VC from the US 12 to 18 months ago than I am now. Now I just feel like I know this business the best. I have an amazing leadership team. We can figure this out. Do I really need that, brand, that VC brand on our register? I'm less attached to that than I was 18 months ago.
Okay, cool. Well, let's move into the quickish fire round. And can you tell me what one thing has moved the needle the most for you in your career?
Being opportunistic, listening to my friends more than I listen to my inner voice about what to do.
What about the best advice you've ever received?
So, quick story, when I was at high school, we had this wanted for poster that existed for each of us. And the one that was attached to me was Barb Hyman, wanted for disturbing the peace. So I've always been a bit of a bruiser in that way. And I think the best advice is just own who you are, right? Rather than try and dial it down. Your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness. So I think just really authenticity and owning who you are and claiming that.
I like that. What about the biggest mistake you've made and lesson learned?
So when you think about an organization and whether you want to be part of that organization, you think about, can I do this job? Is this a team I want to be part of? Is this the right culture? And I took a job where 1 and 2 were ticked, but the third, on reflection, was not. It was a culture that did not suit me. I have a strong bias for action. I don't like admiring the problem. I want to get shit done. And I walked into a business that was very comfortable, very successful, where the biggest value and trait was psychological safety. And I don't think there's such a thing as psychological safety in being in a startup, which is why I'm in this environment for me. And it was the wrong fit for me. So it was a bit like organ rejection syndrome. I just couldn't be myself and I couldn't do what I wanted to do in that environment. So I think you've really got to look at the fit between not just you and the team and whether the job excites you, but is this a culture that's really aligned to who I am and my values and how I like to work?
Yeah, very true. What about your favorite? Do you have a favorite book on entrepreneurship, and what is it and why?
Look, I guess I just read books by people I really find inspiring rather than necessarily focus on entrepreneurship. Margaret Heffernan, I don't know if you've heard of her, has written a number of books. She's this amazing academic, US academic, one called Willful Blindness, which I highly recommend. She also has a TED talk about the importance of social capital to create high-performing teams rather than hierarchy and lots of leaders running around. Ginny Rometty, who used to be the CEO of IBM, has also written a wonderful book, which I found really inspiring. And I listened to your podcast, and there's one other one that I'm really loving, which is Acquired, which goes very deeply into stories of businesses, which is quite amazing.
Cool. Very good. I'll have to look at those books. I think you said Margaret Heffernan was it, and then Ginny Rometty, right? So
yes,
yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, we'll have to check those out. Well, obviously you're on a call or on the podcast with me quite late, so curious around this one. What time do you start and finish work?
Look, it's just, there's no distinction. You know, I'm always on. It's very hard to switch off. I am a workaholic, and I used to hide it. Now I don't. From the team, I have made a habit of trying not to do messages on Slack on weekends. But, you know, I travel a lot for work, so it's easy for me to get away with sending Slack messages at strange times. So, you know, the one thing I try and do is when I'm with my kids is really put the phone away, really be present. And but other than that, I'm just, you can't disassociate from what's going on in the business. It's impossible.
What do you do then for your kind of mental health and wellness? You know, given I guess kind of what you have to give to the business, right? And as you said, you can't sort of disassociate the long hours. You know, it can take its toll. So what do you do?
Well, I tell myself I do yoga, but I actually haven't been very much for the last few years. So I'm trying to make a commitment to do that. And hanging with the kids. Kids are a great tool for just bringing you down to reality because they don't let me take myself too seriously.
Very good. Very good. They can cause other stresses, or certainly mine can, depending on the age. Mine is 7 and 8.
Yeah.
So, but I do enjoy the downtime with them. Well, Barb, thanks so much for coming on the show today. Where can people find you online if they want to reach out? What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, just follow us on LinkedIn, Sapia.ai, or you can connect with me, Barb Hyman, on LinkedIn. That's where I spend most of my social time.
Awesome. Well, Barb Hyman, CEO and founder of Sapia.ai, thank you so much for reaching out to me in the first place and joining me at this late hour to come onto the SaaS Revolution Show. Really appreciate it. You sharing your story. Congrats on the success so far, and looking forward to see where you go.
Been my pleasure. Thanks, Alex.